Section 23 of Lectures to Young People. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Adam Milligan. Lectures to Young People by William B. Sprague. Lecture number 13, Defense Against Temptation. 2. Having now attempted to illustrate the fact that young Christians are in peculiar danger from temptations, I proceed secondly to illustrate the means which the text prescribes for avoiding this evil. They are watchfulness and prayer. Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. It is a truth distinctly implied in this direction, and one of great practical importance, that watchfulness and prayer ought always to exist together. Watchfulness without prayer is self-confidence. Prayer without watchfulness is presumption. In the one case, we proudly repose for security in our own strength. In the other, we pervert the scriptural doctrine of dependence to fatalism. They are two things which God hath joined together in this world, and both reason and experience sanction the connection. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God that worketh in you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. We will now inquire in what manner the duties enjoined in the text are to be performed. 1. In respect to the first of these duties, viz., watchfulness, I observe that you are to watch against the occasions of temptation. There are indeed temptations of various kinds involved in our providential allotments. The plain path of duty is often beset with them, so that you cannot decline to encounter the one, without at the same time turning your back upon the other. In all cases of this kind you are to go forward unhesitatingly, not doubting that you are called of God to the conflict, and that if you arm yourself suitably for it, he will give you the victory. The occasions of temptation against which you are to watch are of a different kind. They are needless occasions, those which offer themselves not in the course of duty, but in the pursuit of mere worldly pleasure or advantage. For instance, something presents itself to your view as an object of desire, which is by no means necessary to your comfort, and which will not contribute in any degree to your usefulness. But in order to attain it, you must place yourself in circumstances in which you will be exceedingly liable to fall into sin. The case then is clear that you ought not to place yourself in these circumstances. For while the good to be attained is little or nothing, the evil to which you are exposed may be immense. Or you may think to expose yourself to temptation where there is no other purpose to be gained than merely to test your own strength, to secure to yourself the pleasure resulting from a victory. Here again you place yourself on the enemy's ground without a warrant. You rush into the field before you have orders from the captain of salvation, and you have nothing to expect but that your presumption will be punished by an ignominious defeat. I repeat then, watch against all needless occasions of temptation. While you are careful not to decline any conflict to which you are called in the course of duty, be equally careful not to volunteer your service in this way where there is no occasion. Watch against the power of temptation. I have already said that, in the discharge of duty, you will often necessarily be placed in circumstances in which you may be tempted. Here then your whole vigilance is to be put in requisition that you do not fall, and you have every encouragement to this course from the fact that you are engaged in the cause and at the bidding of your Master. Count it all joy, says the Apostle James, when ye fall into divers temptation. i.e., if God in his providence bring his children into temptation, it may be an occasion of joy to them, as furnishing additional evidence of his paternal kindness in bringing them through it, and of their renovation. As temptation derives its power chiefly from a wrong state of the heart, it is especially necessary, when you are placed in these circumstances, that you should keep your heart with all diligence. You are to cultivate indeed at all times that lively sense of divine things, that spiritual and heavenly frame of feeling, which will be most likely to shield you from this evil. But you are to take special care to bring yourself under the influence of religious feelings, as you are about to approach a scene of temptation. You are to go with your whole soul bathed in the holy influences of the gospel, with that spirit which prompted the blessed Redeemer in similar circumstances to say, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And if you discover the least drawing of your affections towards the forbidden object, you are to regard it as the signal for alarm. And when you have once begun to dally with the temptation, to institute the inquiry with yourself whether you may yield to it or not, or to cast about you for palliating circumstances, rely on it, you have already begun to sink under its power. Watch, watch, my young friends, against the beginning of this evil. Watch unto prayer. Watch for opportunities of prayer. It is an important part of Christian economy to have stated seasons for private devotion, for experience proves that where this duty is made a matter of convenience merely, and is left to occupy only the remnants of time which may be occasionally gathered up from the occupations of the world, there is a chilling influence exerted, under which all the graces of the Christian languish. Be careful, therefore, that you have stated seasons for visiting your closet, and let your worldly concerns all be arranged, so far as possible, with reference to these seasons. When you foresee providential circumstances which will prevent you from observing the usual hour, anticipate your devotions, and when you are prevented by some unexpected event, instead of passing over the duty for that time, avail yourself of the first opportunity to perform it. I know indeed that the form of this duty may be observed without the spirit, but if the form be habitually neglected, it is scarcely too much to say that the spirit is wanting, of course. I am aware that there are many situations in which the discharge of this duty is attended with peculiar difficulties, and there is much reason to fear that many young professors, after struggling with these difficulties for a while, come at length to regard them as constituting an apology for the neglect of the duty altogether. Hence I have no doubt it is that many a youth who once gave fair promise of being a devoted Christian has sunk into a state of spiritual apathy so deep as scarcely to be distinguished from the lethargy of impenitence. As you would avoid this tremendous evil, my young friends, guard against that neglect of secret devotion which will be sure to lead to it. If your circumstances subject you to peculiar embarrassment in reference to this duty, endeavor to counteract their unfavorable influence by a double degree of watchfulness and diligence. There is hardly any condition in which you will be likely to be placed, but by proper exertion you may secure at least some moments every day for retirement. And where this is impracticable, you may and ought to lift your heart to God in silent ejaculations. If in his providence he places you in a condition in which you can commune with him in no other manner, such an offering, no doubt, will be accepted. But you are also to watch for the spirit of prayer. Without the spirit of devotion, the form is mere hypocrisy, though, as has been already intimated, we are not to look for the spirit where the form is habitually neglected. It should be your object to watch for the spirit constantly, not merely when you go into your closet, but amidst your ordinary cares and occupations. In the workshop, or on the farm, or in the counting room, even in those circumstances which would seem least favorable to devotional feeling, you may still occasionally retire within yourself, and do something to fan the sacred flame. You should watch for this spirit in the events of providence, which either occur in your experience, or fall under your observation, whether they are adapted to deepen humility, to quicken faith, to nourish gratitude, or to bring into exercise any other of the elements of devotion. And whenever you discover the Holy Spirit's operation in the silent movements of your soul toward heaven, cherish this divine influence with peculiar care. Be not satisfied till the spirit of devotion is plentifully shed abroad in your heart, and your soul is filled with all the fullness of God. Moreover, you are to watch for answers to prayer. If you should ask some signal favor of an earthly superior, and it should not be granted, you would naturally be led to inquire whether there were not something in the manner of your asking which prevented the bestowment of it. In like manner, if you do not receive the blessings which you ask of God, it may well lead you to review your prayers, especially the spirit with which they have been offered, and see whether your want of sincerity or faith or perseverance does not constitute the grand obstacle to their being answered. On the other hand, if your prayers actually are answered, you should notice it as a ground of thanksgiving and encouragement. If you have reason to believe that, in answer to your petitions, some sore temptation which threatened you has been averted, or that you have received an increased measure of strength to encounter some temptation into which you have been brought, while you give God the glory, you will feel new resolution for your future conflicts, and new encouragement to cast yourself upon divine aid. 2. But the other duty which the text enjoins as a means of defense against temptation is prayer. Concerning this let me say, that you are not to pray that God will not permit you to fall into temptation above what you are able to bear. In all thy ways acknowledge God, and he will direct thy paths. He knows perfectly what temptations, with a given degree of strength, you will be able to overcome, and he is abundantly able so to arrange events in his providence that the temptation to which you are exposed shall not exceed your ability of resistance. Let it be your prayer, then, that he will prevent you from being placed in circumstances which will involve temptations too powerful for you, and if you should heedlessly seek such a situation, that he will oppose insurmountable obstacles to your arriving at it. But on the other hand, you are to pray that, If in the providence of God you fall into great temptation, you may be prevented by an increased degree of grace from falling before it. There are some cases in which the temptation cannot be anticipated, as it results from circumstances into which you are brought contrary to your expectations. But in such cases it is your duty to send up a silent petition to God that he will grant you grace equal to the exigency. Other cases there are in which the temptation approaches gradually, and you have time to discipline your heart and offer your prayers in view of it. But as you are never secure in this respect, you are always to pray for the sustaining and overcoming influences of divine grace. To pray that whatever may be the character of the temptation which you are called to meet, you may have strength from on high proportioned to it. With such preparation as this for your spiritual conflict, you will be in little danger of being vanquished. And finally, you are to pray that you may be watchful. A spirit of watchfulness, as you have seen, is absolutely essential to preserve you from falling into sin, and is, therefore, to be regarded as a most important blessing. But like every other blessing, it must come from God, and must be sought by prayer. Let the petition, then, often go up from your heart, that you may be enabled to carry a watchful spirit with you into all your intercourse with your fellow Christians, and with the world, that you may watch against the occasions of temptation, and against its power, that you may watch for opportunities of prayer, for the spirit of prayer, for answers to prayer. And if you follow these directions, you will find that the two duties, or rather two parts of the same duty, which I have been urging, will exert a mutually favorable influence upon each other. That while watchfulness will promote the spirit of prayer, prayer in its turn will increase the spirit of watchfulness, and that together they will constitute an adequate defense against temptation. On a review of our subject, we remark first that the Christian life is a life of great activity. Is not the life of the soldier, stationed in an enemy's country, exposed to innumerable stratagems, and often called out to battle, an active life? What say you then of the life of a Christian, who has to wrestle not against flesh and blood only, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places? And if there be occasion for every Christian to be constantly active in order to prosecute with success the warfare to which he is called, is not this emphatically true of the young Christian, who is assailed by 1,000 temptations and yet is comparatively unfurnished for the conflict? Better 1,000-fold think to remain idle on the field of battle, or when a band of murderers are plotting for your destruction, than to think to encounter the enemies which the young Christian has to meet without severe effort. But though the Christian life is a life of activity, that activity is itself a source of enjoyment. It is not idleness, but exertion, persevering, successful exertion, which makes men happy. It is the privilege of the Christian who has triumphed in the conflict with his spiritual enemies to enjoy a peaceful, grateful, confiding state of mind in view of that grace which gives him the present victory, and of that glory which will crown his final triumph. Even heaven itself, the abode of perfect happiness, though not a scene of warfare, is a place of activity, for its inhabitants rest not day nor night, but give glory and honor and thanks to him that sitteth on the throne, who liveth for ever and ever. I ask you then, my young friend, in view of the consideration now suggested, to examine anew your claim to the Christian character. Is your religion a religion of indolent ease, or of vigorous effort? Are you satisfied to float down with the current of temptation, or do you exert yourself to the utmost to resist it? Do you lead a life of watchfulness and prayer, or are you contented to leave open the doors of your heart to every temptation? Be not deceived. If the path in which you are walking is smooth and easy, if you find in it little of conflict and self-denial, you may imagine indeed that you have found an easy way to heaven. But take heed lest the event should prove that you have been walking in the broad road to hell. Again, learn from this subject that the Christian's actual strength is in proportion to his sense of weakness. When I am weak, said the Apostle, then I am strong. And the same spiritual paradox occurs in the experience of every Christian. Observe the solution of it. When the Christian, looking round upon his spiritual enemies, and looking inward upon himself, feels his inability to grapple with them, when he is brought most deeply to realize that in his own strength he can do nothing, then he is induced to cast himself on the boundless resources of God's grace. If left to his own unassisted efforts, he feels that he is as helpless as an infant, but girded with omnipotence, he can do all things. To a spirit of activity, then, my young friends, join a spirit of dependence. Be fearless of temptation only when you repose in Jehovah your strength, and let every victory which you gain, while it ministers to your humility by reminding you of your own weakness, carry your soul upward to Almighty God in devout thanksgiving for his all-conquering grace. Finally, happy they who are trained up in this world of conflict for a world of glory. There are those who enjoy far less happiness than the Christian, who, by living here, are prepared only for a world of despair. But the Christian, by the warfare which he maintains in the strength of almighty grace, is becoming qualified for the everlasting communion of angels. Does the thought ever rise in your heart, my young friends, in some moments of impatience, that these struggles with temptation are almost too severe to be endured? Beyond that dark valley which lies a little way onward in your path, and into which you will soon descend, there is a bright region of immortal glory. You cannot see it now, for the darkness that hangs around that valley obstructs your vision. But as sure as you are enlisted in Jehovah's service, you will soon be there. And thence you will look back upon the conflicts of this short period of your existence and weep, if tears can be in heaven, that you should ever have felt a sentiment of reluctance at enduring them. Travel on then, young Christian, for though young, the hills of Canaan will soon greet your longing eyes. And is it so that you are so near that bright inheritance? Is it so that sweet fields beyond the swelling floods, watered by the river of life and smiling with immortal verdure, are soon to receive your weary feet? Welcome, then, all the horrors of this howling desert. Welcome all the fiery serpents which hell itself can send out. Welcome the most rough and stormy passage over Jordan, if this brief hour of conflict is to be succeeded by an eternity of glory. End section 23.